One man. Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Three Technique, the college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. Fella, it's time to talk playoff seeding. Quite frankly, here as we've got Week 12 in front of us. We've got a number of ranked matchups, which is great. I think throughout some of the conferences, maybe some of the games that we were looking forward to having some meaning, kind of pillow fights, right? CBS, their game of the week is the Land-Grant Trophy, which is an epic trophy, but it's between 3-6 Penn State and 3-6 Michigan State. So I think you've got kind of the highest of highs this week with some of the big games. You've also got some storylines that it's just incredibly unfortunate how quickly we've had to brush those under the rug. But Trey, you were kind of talking about how you don't like the November lull earlier in our group text. And while I agree with you, I also kind of find it refreshing to focus on some of the biggest games, the biggest storylines, and maybe start to be able to chart some playoff predictions.
Yeah, it does help us zero in. And honestly, from a playoff contender standpoint, it's been really, really easy to map out because as you clear the last hurdle, I'm thinking of teams like Ole Miss. I'm thinking of teams like hopefully Texas A&M, as we talk about them a little bit this weekend. It seems like most of the major hurdles to just getting in have been cleared, and now we're just playing for seeding. So, yeah, that does make it a lot easier to make a prediction. But, I mean, just from a selfish standpoint, I do want to watch big-time, matchups, big-time elimination games. Maybe we'll get a little bit more of that next year as the ACC and SEC go to 9 games in their conference. But, yeah, for now, we do get these little lulls in mid-November, but it'll pick right back up for rivalry week, and that'll have a lot of stakes again.
I think this lull is actually horrific timing for the Disney YouTube TV spat, which I don't necessarily want to give the mouse any more coverage than what we already do. Everybody's obviously talking about it. They're losing millions of dollars every day, but their backup plan is pushing you to another service that they own. Shocker. But I do think it's the one kind of bargaining tool maybe that YouTube TV and the fans have is like, hey, maybe we'll just wait it out. Like, there's not that many games that we really care to have on a multi-view. If you get multiple logins or multiple screens through another, heaven forbid you go back to cable, there are ways around it that last week was kind of annoying. But this week, maybe we can get by without another quad box experience. I don't know. Throw on the Blitz on the radio or on your smartphone and, watch whatever feature game you got going on. Like, there are ways to get around it, and I kind of take a small amount of solace that might be sticking it to the mouse just a little bit.
Well, and the multi-screen, if you just buy a couple of TVs or if you go out to a sports bar, hang out with your buddies, like you're doing it the old-fashioned way, like back in 2021, 2022, before this was really a thing. That this is the way that we always used to watch football. So what they're doing is they're reminding us of the way that things used to be. And that's going to be a problem for them when we realize we like hanging out with each other and getting a couple TVs in the same room.
When
all I know is, guys, I will not pay for that ESPN service. You cannot make me. No. I will make as many free Fubo trial emails as it takes. I can add as many numbers to the end of that email as I need to. We can wait
Garrett
this one
1
out.
at Gmail, Garrett 2 at Gmail.
When Garrett said just go buy a bunch of TVs and put them in the same room together, I got whiffs of the "stop being poor" meme.
Oh, TVs are cheap now. They're like, what, $100, $200 for the little bitty guys that just barely run Roku? Come on, they're easy.
Sure, yeah. Just fill up your shopping cart with a couple of those and all the problems.
Black Friday is basically the entire month of November now. So
yeah, come on.
I think he's onto something.
That's true. Yeah, every radio commercial is get Black Friday prices without having to stand in line. I'm like, dude, we haven't had to stand in line in the better part of a decade. What are you talking about? Nevertheless, welcome in to our college football podcast where we talk about the macroeconomic issues facing our culture at large. Gentlemen, this show, every show brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Use our code 3TechPod. You get $100 in bonus funds. Would highly encourage you to head on over to the app, download that, get some winners going. Trey and I last week didn't go great for me. It started out bad, though. The card that I gave out was immediately voided thanks to Blake Shapen basically getting benched after coming up hobbled in like the first quarter. So my card was wrecked from the outset. But listen, if you've got your own plays, if you're perusing around, seeing what the offerings are over on Underdog, doesn't just have to be college football. It can be NFL, it can be basketball, stick puck, NHL, whatever you've got going on. Our code will get you $100 in free bonus plays.
If I
Trey.
could toot my own horn really quickly on the Underdog plays, I haven't been great at the lineups, but 2 out of my 3 best bowl mania teams did make the playoffs. So that starts this week.
Go.
And I'm very excited about that. The third one missed by literally 7 points across the whole season. Came in 4th place, needed to get 3rd. That was tough. But right. 2 out of 3 march on. We'll see how far they go in the playoffs.
That's right. So shout out to Underdog Fantasy once again. Gentlemen, let's start this show by calling your shot. I want to know who you believe the 12 playoff teams will be. This doesn't have to be in any specific order, but we did put it in our conference champions and the at-large bid. So Garrett, let's start with you. I want your 5 conference champions. I want your at-large bids. Who do you project will make the 12-team field?
Yeah, so I ended up just copying these from my poll and deciding like, okay, well, if this is how I ranked them in the poll that I had, this is probably how I should put them out there. So
there you go.
Right now, I've got Ohio State, A&M, Texas Tech, Georgia Tech, and South Florida as my kind of conference champs who's getting in. My at-large bids are Indiana, Alabama, both coming up runners-up there. Oregon, Georgia, Ole Miss, Notre Dame, and BYU finding a way to squeak in too.
BYU would be interesting. At this point, I think they have to win the conference championship. There are cases to be made for Cincinnati earning an at-large bid. If they win out, there's a case for Utah. The numbers, we've talked about them. The statistical nerds love Utah. So I think there are multiple Big 12 teams still alive. I do wonder if that means, though, that BYU has to be the conference champion. If they can get in with 2 losses, both being to Texas Tech, you could make that argument. Given the way that some of these SEC teams are playing, maybe if Oregon has 2 losses, if USC finds their way into the field, that would be an interesting debate at the table. Trey, you've got your field, but you also have a bunch of like what ifs. So I'll just kind of kick it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of been driving this train since September on making the Bowl Maniology playoff projections each week. So I have a million scenarios running through my mind every single week, every time I sim these out each week. So bear with me for a second while I nerd out. But my field, I think, Garrett, is actually the exact same as yours, except I currently have JMU in as the G5 champion, not necessarily because I think they're a better team than South Florida. I think South Florida would probably beat them by about 10 points, at least on a neutral field. That's no shade at James Madison. I just think South Florida is that good. But I wonder if the committee, like you said on the recap show on Saturday, Mitch, I just wonder if the committee will go with a 2-loss team should South Florida finish the season 11-2, I guess it would be, over a 12-1 James Madison. I just don't know. I kind of need to see the committee do that before I really buy into that. But Mitch, you're talking about BYU, and I think they may benefit from there just being a lack of another team to fill in that last at-large spot. Because you look down, there's not going to be anybody from the ACC, right? That's basically solidified now as you sim this out. Garrett, did you? Yeah, you had Georgia Tech as your ACC champion. I did as well. They come up favorably in a lot of tiebreaker scenarios. The other team that comes up very favorably in a lot of tiebreaker scenarios is Duke. And if they won the ACC championship, they would be 9-4 on the season. Does a 9-4 Duke ACC champion get in? That's scenario number 1. I don't know. Like, can the committee justify doing that when there would theoretically be a 12-1 James Madison and I guess 11-2 South Florida sitting right there, as well as maybe 11-2 Boise State.
I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to pull up their schedule. At the very least, you would have a win over a top 15 Georgia Tech team in the conference championship, right? So I think
In a
that's
rematch, yeah.
In a rematch, I think there's your like biggest quality win. And I think the committee would be desperate to find quality wins to avoid leaving the ACC out. Like you would have, they already did it once with Florida State, right?
That's what I was about to say. I think that ship's kind of already sailed, at least in the 14 playoff era.
But if they beat Virginia, who will, I think, still be ranked in the top 25, right? I mean, it's an 8-1 team. Wake Forest has played spoiler for a couple teams. I don't think that you could just immediately rain on that parade. Trey, I think you would be thrilled if that Wake Forest game was of consequence at the end of the season.
No, we got them to a bowl game. Now I kind of want Duke to win out and make the committee make this decision. I'm selfishly rooting for that.
But if you have two closing top 25 wins plus a conference championship, I think the committee would probably be forced to bend over backwards in order to prevent the ACC from being relegated beneath the American and the Sun Belt, because that's what you'd be saying. That is literally what you would be doing, is saying, yes, you lost 4 games, but we're going to devalue your championship and this run that you made to get here beneath to objectively inferior conferences as a whole. And that might be a bridge too far for me.
Couple things real quick. According to the SP Plus, the American is actually much closer, the ACC is actually much closer to the American than they are the SEC or the Big Ten.
Sure.
Little embarrassing for the ACC, but
yeah,
I also just I can't help but think about last year when the committee told Alabama, yes, you do have some good wins. You beat Georgia, you beat, they lost Tennessee, but they had some really good wins, but they couldn't look over the bad losses. And wouldn't it not be saying the same thing to a Georgia or Duke team that would, yes, have a couple of objectively good wins should they win out, but would have some really bad losses. They'd have a loss to Tulane that wouldn't win the American. They'd have a loss to Illinois. Is not a bad loss, but the way they lost to Illinois would be really bad. I don't think a team that lost to UConn, no offense to the Huskies, they'd have a great story up there in stores, but I don't think a team that lost to UConn should necessarily be considered for a last at large bid, or an auto bid. But man, I think it comes down to, like I was saying with BYU, there's just a lot of what ifs there. And there's not a lot of teams that are stepping up to claim that last at large or that last automatic qualifier should it come to that. There's just a big void there, and teams that could win their way in down the stretch if they actually step up and win a game, but we just haven't seen them do that quite yet.
I'm trying to sort here and see, just based off of strength of record, right? Or some just basic analytics. James Madison's actually 29th in strength of record, which is surprising. Duke is all the way down in 58th right now. So I don't know. I mean, maybe here's the thing here, and we'll move on to the predictions here in just a second for our big three. I think this comes down to a couple of things. Number one, the committee following their own rules, wiping the slate clean, and truly adhering to the fact that we're not supposed to use past years as a reference, right? Every year exists in its own vacuum. Do I actually believe they do that? No, absolutely not. But that's what they've said they do. The other thing that I think it will come down to is what version of the eye test do they put into play, right? Because Duke at times has looked like a very complete team. At other times, they've had some terrible moments and they've looked incredibly inconsistent. You talked about that Illinois loss. How much are they watching James Madison as well, right? I mean, sure, if they rank them in the top 25 this week, they're probably going to put some eyeballs on it. But do you actually trust that group to watch G5 football? Because in the past, they've said some things that they've watched it, but it just never feels like they actually are in tune with a literal other half of college football going on. So I don't know. It would be tremendously fascinating. The ACC has done nothing but shoot themselves in the foot. It wouldn't be like Florida State, where the Noles objectively deserved to be in that playoff and the committee did them wrong. In this case, the ACC has done nothing but just fail every major test, right? And so, like, either way, I don't think you can really, if you're the ACC, complain. I'm sure they will, and fire up that PR machine. But like at the end of the day, win your games, right? You're not the SEC. You're not the Big Ten. Win your games. Have a 10-win champion at very minimum, right? And they barely got that last year when Clemson had to beat SMU to get into the dance. So yeah, the consistency of football over in the ACC, it's just objectively not very good right now.
Real quick before we move on, you've got a spicy at large team, and I want you to talk about that real quick.
Well, I put a question mark next to it. USC, and I'm not high on the Trojans. I'm not a believer. I will go down with the ship that Lincoln Riley's a fraud out there in LA. There are rumors that he might be looking to leave USC, and I know he's already tried to shoot those down, but like, listen, Josh Pate, he's leaning into some of the clickbait stuff. I feel like he's leaning into some of the bar stool and busting with the boys sensationalism. But when he says, watch Lincoln Riley this offseason, he's not saying that for no reason, right? So, and that's not a shot at Pate. I'm just kind of setting the stage there. There's a reason why he said that. But if USC finds a way, guys, to win out, they've got, just lost my note. They've got, who is it? Oregon and USC, is that right? Not Oregon.
They've got Oregon,
Yes.
UCLA, and they play Iowa this week.
That's right. Yeah. So we'll talk about Iowa. Then it's at Oregon. It's versus UCLA to finish the season. If that USC team finishes 10-2, they're ranked third in the Big Ten. Like, there's absolutely a world in my mind where if you beat Oregon, you knock them at least a rung below you. Why couldn't you be the third team in the Big Ten? I don't necessarily think it's likely, but I think that USC-Oregon game has gotten a lot tighter and a lot spicier maybe with the way that the Ducks have been throwing the football specifically over the last couple of weeks.
I don't think that's a crazy take. They were my first out just based on my rankings from this last week. I really like what they're doing right now. Their margin of victory has been pretty good. They've been beating teams pretty soundly, and like you're right, the wins down the stretch would prove, I think, a lot to get them into the dance. Now, it's easier to say, oh, well, just wins over Oregon and Iowa. Like, that's not, obviously easy to do, but if they can go and take care of that, wins of any fashion against those two teams probably find a way to get you into the dance.
I do wonder if USC does pull off that upset at Autzen, if that kicks Oregon out. I'm not convinced a 10-2 Oregon gets in. I'm also not convinced a 10-2 Ole Miss gets in, for that matter, just based on who they might be coming up against. And if Ole Miss goes 10-2, it means they took a very bad loss down the stretch to either South Carolina or Mississippi State. So just file that one away to see what the committee does with that. I think a lot of people assume if you go 10-2 in the Big Ten or the SEC that you're just automatically in. There's a lot of 11-1 teams this year around the country, and that might have something to say about that.
Ole Miss, if they lost to a Mississippi State, they lose to Florida this week, what have you, it would feel Miami adjacent from last year, right? Where the committee went, dude, like, you had one job, just don't lose up in the Dome to Syracuse and you're in, and you failed to get that done. So I could see that certainly being the case, but write in, let us know where your 12-team projections are right now. There's obviously still a bunch of scenarios. We'd love to have your input, your analysis in there as well. Guys, let's get to our big three presented by homefieldapparel.com. Again, our code 3TechPod gets you 15% off your entire first order. The game of the week, I was really excited about, guys, until Pat Narduzzi stepped up to the podium. Of course, we're talking about number 10 Notre Dame at number 24 Pitt, the 11 a.m. game on ABC, which actually, spoiler alert, if you're wondering what our top three games are, just look at the ABC television schedule. It is the 11 a.m. game, the 2:30 game, and the 6:30 p.m. game. That's going to be our run sheet here. As I mentioned, slight drive-by at CBS, who, again, punted on the SEC schedule, and now, congratulations, you get to call 3-6 Penn State against 3-6 Michigan State. That's neither here nor there. The facts, gentlemen, we have one of, I think, the great rivalries of the East Coast, maybe a little bit lesser known to some of the newer college football audience, but Pitt and Notre Dame do not like each other. And because of the Notre Dame scheduling alliance with the ACC and the rotation that they have, 5 opponents that Notre Dame will play from the ACC every year, that game, which used to be, I believe, an annual tradition or at least a semi-annual tradition, now is kind of every couple of years. They played in 2023. Before that, I believe they played in, it was either 2020 or 2021. But the point being, it has not been a fast rule on the calendar every single year. So this year, Pat Narduzzi and the boys, they get a chance to knock off a top 10 Notre Dame team at home. They get a chance to eliminate a rival from the playoff discussion. Three loss Notre Dame, you're out, right? They're hanging on by a thread. And then Narduzzi steps up to the podium and gets a question about, is the Notre Dame game a must-win scenario? And gentlemen, like any other football coach, I expected him to say, well, of course it is. We go 1-0 every week. That's our focus. We are determined, to play our best ball, focus on us, shut out the noise, et cetera, et cetera. All the coach speak. Narduzzi says no, it's not a must-win game. His 2-loss Pitt Panthers team evidently can punt a game away because it's a non-conference game. And he doesn't just stop there, guys. If I haven't lost all the Pitt fans who tuned into this, maybe you're commiserating with me. I don't know. Hang on. We're going to get to the game in just a second. He doubles, triples down by saying we could lose this game 100 to 3, 100 to 10, and it would be okay because it's not a conference loss. Well, Pat, it's funny that you pulled those numbers because the number that you've lost to Notre Dame the last 2 times you've played them, 2023 and 2021, I believe, you've been outscored 103 to 10 in those 2 matchups. It's been 2 absolute bloodbaths.
Wait,
so
maybe was that the actual score that he said in the press conference? Because I know it was close to that.
He said something like 100 to 10 or something like that. Like he was, he was just pontificating that, we could get blown out. And then when I went and looked up the history and ran the numbers, that's literally what they've been outscored by the last 2 years. So I truly don't know. I don't know why on earth you would say that. I don't know what possessed him to publicly punt this week, guys. And a good football team, Mason Hinchell, has been a revelation on offense. Notre Dame has been a little bit of a buzzsaw, but it feels like winning 10 games in a row is a brutal ask, even for a team like Notre Dame. So I was here ready to sidle up and pick Pitt, not only to cover this spread, but put Notre Dame on upset alert. And now that Pat has opened his mouth and said, no, we don't consider this a must-win game, why would I? Why would I side with him? Why would I ride with that wagon? So I'm taking Notre Dame minus the points.
Yeah, I'm right there with you with the Notre Dame minus the 10.5. It has more to do for me with what Notre Dame is, right? Notre Dame, it seems like since the beginning of the season when they lost to A&M and they lost to Miami, they've been on the warpath, right? They know that they have to make statement after statement. They know that they have to blow teams out, right? They score on like 6 straight possessions against Arkansas, and then they go for it with a fake punt just because they know they got to make a message. They got to send the message to the committee, right? We're here, we're good. Their average margin of victory over their win streak right now is 26.4 points. Big, couple stats on that. They're outpassing teams 276 to 218 per game, and their rushing differential is even better, 217 to 94. They're just kind of bludgeoning teams being better than them. Look, Notre Dame's strength is obviously the running game, which I think will travel well. It'll help extend some Irish drives, keep the Pitt offense off the field, out of rhythm. And I really don't want to discredit Pitt, but if I'm being honest with myself, I'm not really that impressed with them. Like, their best wins are what? Like at FSU or NC State, or like it's not like they've necessarily beaten teams where I go like, oh, that's a great quality win, right? They lost to Louisville. They lost to West Virginia. They're not really that tested outside of that. Can Pitt consistently drive on Notre Dame is going to be my big question. They're both really good, funny enough, in a couple of things. It's a good on good. So Pitt is actually number 2 in the country at getting to the red zone. Notre Dame is number 8 in stopping people from getting to the red zone. So can they drive? But when they get there, neither of them are very good at that end of the field, right? Red zone percentage for Pitt is 69th in the country and then 73rd for Notre Dame in defending. So what happens when they get down there? It's not really either of their strengths. So can they move the ball and get down there? And then can they punch it in is a big question for me. But I think when all the cards are down, Notre Dame is just a better team. They've got a sense of urgency that I don't think Pitt's going to have there. they have to convince the committee. They don't have a conference championship game they can rely on. That's just what they have, right? They have to go and convince people with the eye test. I think they're here to make a statement, and this is kind of their last opportunity to do so. They've finished the season with Syracuse and Stanford. I don't think those are games where you're really going to convince the committee, so it's got to be now. I think they get that, and I think they'll get it done.
Man, you guys are just bullying Pitt fans. They're having a good time for 7 or 5 weeks straight. They had a rough time at the press conference on Monday, and then here you guys
feel bad for them. I'm not bullying
kicking
them.
while they're down.
But I'm not. Like, I'm frustrated for them because I wanted to roll into this and say, hey, let's ride, Pitt. You've got Notre Dame at home, a rival in your own backyard. Go pull it off. But if your head coach isn't taking this game seriously, then like, what am I supposed to do?
I don't disagree with you. But if there's any Pitt fans still listening, let me give you some hope, because admittedly, I wrote this before your coach put his foot in his mouth and failed Coach Speak 101. But which, by the way, he's not wrong technically, but I'll just leave it at that. He's not incorrect. You don't say that in public, but you're not incorrect. I want to believe here. I'm taking Pitt plus 10.5 because I know Notre Dame's a wagon. I know all the stats that they've done. They've been obliterating teams for the most part on this win streak. And like you said, Garrett, they've had to make sure that they're showcasing their talents to the committee. Pitt's kind of been a wagon too, especially on the offensive side of the ball since they made that quarterback switch over to Henschel. 40 points per game. That would be 5th nationally over that 5-game win streak. 445.8 yards per game. It would be 23rd nationally if you just went off those 5 games with Henschel. And it's really opened up the run game. Look, this is a team that has not had anything go right this year. They had to they benched their very promising young quarterback, right? Their best player in Desmond Reed has not played in every game this year. I think he's only appeared in 6 games. He's gotten hurt in a couple of them. So not a lot has gone right, but yet here they are. This is a team with one of the best defensive lines in the ACC, if not the best defensive line in the ACC. They're actually 3rd best in the country at stopping the run and 6th in defensive success rate against the run. So strength on strength here. I think Pitt can probably hold their own for most of this game as long as their offense can keep putting up points. When you saw Notre Dame struggle, it was against teams like A&M and Miami who stuffed the run a little bit. Notre Dame got a couple big gains on the ground, but they had to do a lot through the air. I think forcing CJ Carr to really beat teams with his arm, he hasn't had to do that a lot this year. He's made a lot of great throws. He's a great quarterback, but he's always had that safety blanket, at least on this win streak, of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. So if they can bottle that up, if they can contain them as best they can, I think they have a really good chance of keeping this one close and having a shot down the stretch. But yeah, I'll take Pitt plus the points. Mason Henschel has been the hot dog at the turn that we said that Pitt needed. We didn't know that they were going to get that in Mason Henschel. We thought they were going to just have to go to Costco and buy a bunch, but hey, they found one at a random roadside stand, and sometimes that's the best hot dogs you're ever going to have.
I think Henschel was the Pro V1 in the woods, right? Like you've been losing a bunch of balls on the front 9. You're fighting the miss both ways. You're stuck in the creek trying to find your vice or whatever you sent in there. And you find this Pro V1, and lo and behold, you get to 18 and you've birdied a couple holes and you've played the rest of the round with that ball. That might be Mason Henschel in a nutshell. Now,
and the analogy here is that this is now the 16th hole that is a par 4 that you have to drive over the water. And Pat Narduzzi is putting that Pro V1 right back in his bag and saying, I'll pull out the noodle just in case here.
That was literally what I was going to say. It's like you've made it, through most of the round. You're feeling good again. And then suddenly like, all 3 of these are just force carry, baby. Like big shots over water here is, I think, what we're looking at. So listen, let us know. Fair, foul. Are you still back in Pitt? Trey certainly is. I think that's probably going to be the clip that we go with for our YouTube shorts. But if you're riding with Pitt, if you're looking past Narduzzi, awesome. Again, I want to ride with you. I think Des Reed could do a lot of special things in this game. I'm genuinely excited to watch this matchup. But man, what a rough week to start from the podium for the Pitt Panthers. So from the 11 a.m. game, let's go to the afternoon contest, gentlemen. Number 4, Alabama. Number 12, Oklahoma. Again, these are before the newest playoff rankings come out. Apologies if that changes just ever so slightly. But the Crimson Tide, as of recording, are 6.5-point favorites. 2:30 p.m. game on ABC. Interesting spot for both teams, right? This is a revenge spot for last year's drubbing that the Sooners handed out to Alabama in Norman. It eliminated Alabama from the playoffs. It really kind of like put the final nail, I think, in the coffin of Jalen Milroe as a college quarterback, and what is his legacy going to be at Alabama? Coming into this game, guys, I was looking for edges. I was looking for statistical advantages, but I knew I had to start at the running game. And Alabama has been hard to watch. Oklahoma has been hard to watch. I didn't realize it was as bad as it actually is statistically. Oklahoma is 90th in the country in rushing offense this season. Alabama is 120th in the country. They can't do anything on the ground, which makes me really nervous coming into this game because I think a passing attack probably does favor Alabama, even though the Sooners have I think they're 22nd in the country in pass defense. But we've seen that back end be leaky at times, right? And get exposed by the big play. I think that's Alabama's path to victory here. Can they sustain drives? Can they keep one foot in front of the other, moving the chains? Obviously, an extremely talented wide receiving core. And we saw Oklahoma struggle at moments, at key moments, to keep up with Ole Miss a couple of weeks ago in Norman. I don't like the line. It makes me nervous because there's not one thing on the offense that I'm really leaning on for either team, but I think I'm going to take the Crimson Tide at home. I think they're a better team. I just trust them a little bit more. And to be quite honest, again, going back to the Ole Miss game, when Oklahoma struggles to get first downs, there's not kind of the break glass in case of emergency as of late. I think Alabama can outscore the Sooners.
Guys, I was coming on here ready to talk about how I agree with everybody that Bama's going to win this game, but I did some digging and I'm calling the OU upset. I'm going to say that Oklahoma's going to walk in there and beat the Tide. And here's why. So we talked about the Alabama run game. Alabama currently only running for 111 per game. OU is only giving up 82 per game. I think it's safe to say Bama's not running the football against Oklahoma. That's just probably not part of their game plan going in. Oklahoma has, however, been carved up in the back end, in recent weeks, right? They gave up 315 to Ole Miss and 393 to Tennessee, but they did go 1-1 in those games, right? They did beat Tennessee despite it. So my question is Ty Simpson going to be able to win by himself in the pocket, not just put up yards, but win the game by himself in the pocket? OU's defense is tied for 4th in the country in sacks, and if they can get after Simpson, it's going to be an issue for Bama, right? That's where they start to shut down real quick. If they can't run the ball a little bit, keep it balanced, if they can't keep it in, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2 situations, I think it could be really bad for Alabama trying to go against this Oklahoma defense. Now, other side of the ball, the complaint is about the OU offense and its running game, right? The supporting cast around Mateer, right? That we've talked about how Mateer is like 99% of their offensive efficiency. But in recent weeks, Xavier Robinson is the guy. Okay, last couple weeks against Ole Miss, he ran 9 carries for 109 yards, and then against Tennessee, 16 carries for 115. So no, they haven't been running the ball, but theirs isn't a can't. Theirs is just a didn't. They just weren't running the football. They didn't know who their guys were. I don't know what it was, but they just couldn't run the football beginning of the season, but they've started to turn it around in recent games. It's no secret that John Mateer has not been the same since he's returned for surgery. Can he get back to that? That's a big question, right? But I want to point out that Bama has played tighter games when they've played quarterbacks who can run. South Carolina was a close game. Missouri was close. Prebula had some wheels. Georgia was close. Stockton has the ability to make some stuff happen and extend plays with his legs. Florida State at the beginning of the season, right? They've played the closer games and they've struggled when a quarterback has the ability to run. Mateer certainly has that ability. So if Mateer can return to form a little bit, and I think, with a little bit of time off, it's been a couple of weeks, he's maybe a little healthier, maybe getting back in the rhythm of things, maybe took some time to kind of work on his mechanics a bit. If he can return to form, and if that defense plays up to their normal standards, I'm picking the upset. They're going to force Ty Simpson to play hero ball, and he can, but I don't think he will. Oklahoma pulls the upset. They're staying in playoff contention, and they're throwing a big wrench into the SEC.
I think that's a good case. I think if you're making the case for Oklahoma winning this game, it is on the back of a defense that completely makes Alabama one-dimensional and gets just enough. I think there's high rock fight potential in this game, guys. I think that this is going to be a game where both offenses really struggle to move the ball. Alabama because Oklahoma is a really good defense, and Oklahoma struggling to move the ball because Alabama has a decent defense, and they just really, against anybody with a pulse on defense, have really struggled to put up a ton of points. So yeah, I think, again, great job laying it out. I'm going to take the other side here. I'm going to take Bama to cover this spread 6.5, just because I'm concerned about Oklahoma being able to string drives together. And I'm really concerned about them wearing their defense out by not being able to move the ball down the field. Oklahoma's 54th in quality drive rate and 95th in points per quality drive. So that's a double whammy of they're not necessarily consistently putting drives together. And when they do, they're way more often settling for field goals or not getting any points out of those drives. The Bama defense, conversely, is 16th in quality drive rate allowed and 28th in points allowed per quality drive. So hat tip to Parker Fleming for all those stats, by the way. Buy him a cup of coffee on his site if you use it. So I'm just really worried that eventually Alabama's weapons are going to win out. I love Oklahoma's secondary. They've shut down some really good passing offenses, but the best of the best that they've played, right? Tennessee, Ole Miss, even Auburn a little bit. Auburn eclipsed 200 yards on them back in September. The best of the best that they've played have really eventually found some success against them. So I think that's what I'm taking to win out here. I'm going to take Alabama at home to cover this spread. But if Oklahoma does find a way, this is a true win your way in scenario to an at-large bid, because after this, they've got Mizzou at home, LSU at home, not 100% cakewalks by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly you feel like if you can get Bama, you can get both of those.
No doubt about that. And I think Oklahoma is a team that certainly needs to be on everybody's radar. They're the second team out. They were the second team out on the initial CFP polls. So it's clear that the committee still values them as a complete team. I think the defense obviously doing a lot of heavy lifting. John Mateer's first half of the season probably also carrying them that high up the polls. They obviously got it right with Texas being ahead of Oklahoma, but I still felt like maybe both of those teams ranked a little bit highly based off of what we had seen from them so far, right? Like, you can talk strength of schedule, you can talk quality wins. By the end of the year, I don't think that Tennessee win is going to be anything of note for Oklahoma, but to your point, you knock off Alabama, you knock off Missouri, you knock off LSU, like that's a heck of a string to close things out. And by that point, it wouldn't really matter. Oklahoma would more than likely be in. The last thing I'll say that goes in favor of the Sooners, Alabama, like Georgia, we've been beating this drum. We'll talk Georgia here in just a second. Not adept at getting to the quarterback, right? It's just been a bizarre year where the front seven has been effective at stopping the run, has been effective at kind of disrupting the flow of an opponent's offense. But when it came to just getting the quarterback on the ground, Georgia's terrible at it. Alabama's kind of painfully average at it. So will that offensive line for Oklahoma that has had all sorts of struggles this year, that has not consistently been able to protect John Mateer, that has not been consistently able to open up running lanes, can they take another step in their evolution forward and give their quarterback maybe an emerging running game? I still have my hesitancies, but can they give them a stable platform with which to get first downs to string those drives together? We'll see. 2:30 p.m. on ABC. Final game of our big three. It's the nightcap. Number 5, Georgia. Number 11, Texas. The Dogs. 6.5-point favorites at home against Texas. And this has been kind of a bugaboo for the Longhorns, right? They went, 0-3 against Georgia last year? Is that right? 0-2, 0-3. Maybe Sark is
just twice.
Sark is 0-3 maybe in his career against Georgia, something like that.
Here's the stat, Mitch. We can start with this. Sark is 1-8 against top 6 opponents in his career at Texas, and he is, let me find it here, 44-11 against all other teams.
That's wild. That's quite the discrepancy. I did see some comparisons maybe thrown out to James Franklin, some Matt Rule comparisons for Sark. It's not exactly all sunshine and daisies on the message boards around Steve Sarkisian. But Trey, I'll kick it over to you. Like 6.5, it feels a tad high to me, given Texas's I don't know if you want to call it offensive resurgence, maybe just signs of life that they've had these last couple of weeks. They've gone down to the wire against some average to below average teams in the SEC, but it was done on the road. So, maybe take that with a grain of salt. And then they did beat a then ranked top 10 Vanderbilt team at home the last time we saw them before the bye.
Yeah, I'm going to take Georgia -6.5 here. Garrett has some great stats that can back up this point I'm about to make, so I don't want to step on I don't want to plagiarize his research here, cheat off his homework. But the short of it is Texas has looked a lot better on offense because they've changed their offense and they're trying to do more what Arch can do at this point. My concern is I don't know if he can do that against this Georgia defense, right? It's been a lot of short, quick stuff. It's been relying on a broken missed tackle. The way that you beat Georgia this year is you've beaten them over the top. That's why Tennessee put up so many points on them. You think about how Alabama could have scored more points if they just catch the ball over the top with those receivers, right? So I don't know that this new strategy for Texas is going to work. And then you combine that with just the intangibles, right? I mentioned the stat 1-8 versus top 6 opponents for Sark. 0-2 against Georgia last year. It's the same. You just go put play on both the times they said they played Georgia last year and when they played Ohio State leading up to this year. What I said, I just have to see them beat an actual elite team before I pick them to do it. So on top of that, like this one is personal for Kirby. Do y'all remember the on the field interview after they won in Austin last year? The Darth Kirby memes that just went crazy. It's personal for him. He does not like that Texas has just come into the league and is starting to throw their weight around and getting all the praise from the media as the new Alabama, like they said before this year. Kirby hates that. And I think he has a different team this year. He's winning in a different way, but this is personal to him almost as much as some of those rivalry games are. So I don't think that if he gets up kind of like he did last year, it's not going to be time for mercy in this one. So I'm taking Georgia minus the 6.5. Got to see it from Texas before I pick them to win this big one on the road.
Yeah, I love the take. Obviously, I have a little bit of the data on that one. So I was so curious about Arch Manning and his resurgence, right? Like, how is it that he went from being middling, can't figure it out, to all of a sudden he's back, right? Arch Manning that we thought we were going to have with the Warby Parker and everything else, like he's here, right? And then I started to think like, okay, so what was happening? Is it matching what my eyes are telling me? And it was. Texas made him stop scanning the field, stop waiting for the deep developing stuff to happen, and started just saying, let's throw a quick out and let some of our athletes make plays, right? We're a team, chock full of athletes and good transfers. They can score if they catch it 5 yards down the field or 10 yards down the field or 20 yards down the field. Like all of those are good options. And so I went and I looked it up just to see if I was seeing the right thing. This is from Brett Rollins on X. In the first 5 games of the season, Arch had an average depth of target at 11.9. His air yard percent was 57%. The last 4 games since they've kind of switched it and turned it around, his average depth of target is 7.6 and an air yard percent of 35.1. So it's dropped dramatically in terms of how far he's pushing the ball downfield. At average, depth of target typically goes somewhere from 8 to 10 for most college quarterbacks. So they've really shortened the field. They went from being way deep to actually pretty substantially shorter, right? They're not going nearly as deep as other guys go. They've just shortened the field and said, hey, stop thinking about it, stop overanalyzing everything, and just throw it out quick, right? Like if you want a good example, go back to I think it's the San Jose State game, the touchdown he threw to the tight end. He's just rolling out to the left, and it almost looks like it's in slow motion, the way he's just kind of scanning the field and waiting for something to come open. It worked against a team like San Jose State. It wasn't working against everybody else. You compare that to the first touchdown against Vanderbilt, first play of the game, he just swings it out to the side, and then, receiver does the rest, right? And just go be an athlete. So the question here for me was, well, is that going to work against Georgia? And so I looked up Georgia's missed tackle rate. Guys, they miss 5% of their tackles. That ranks number 12 in the country. It's not going to be a good match for Texas, right? It's not a good thing for their offense to mismatch like that. Meanwhile, if you look at the Georgia side of the ball, they're peaking at the right time. They're playing a lot better offense. Gunnar Stockton has 16 touchdown passes this year, but 10 of them in the last 3 games. That's also where he's thrown 40% of his passing yards. A little good on good could be the run game situation. Georgia's averaging 4.7 yards per carry. Texas is giving up 2.4. That's pretty good on both sides. So probably Georgia's going to have to pass a little bit to open up the run and stay balanced. Can Gunner stay consistent? Can he make that happen? For all the crap we give Bobo over there, he seems to have figured out what Gunner Stockton does well, right? He seems to have figured out the formula to get him to succeed. I think Georgia wins this one pretty big. I could see it being double digits. I just trust Georgia's ability to stop that quick passing attack a lot more than I trust Texas's ability to line up for 60 minutes and keep it physical against a really balanced offense from Georgia. I think it'll probably be close for most of the game. It should deliver in terms of just watchability, but I think Georgia pulls away in the fourth quarter.
Well, those changes to the offense were what we've been screaming for weeks. I mean, the entire first half, it doesn't take anybody of much seasoning to look at the offense that Texas was running out there and going, hey, maybe you should throw some shorter passes, because Arch was not being protected well. He wasn't seeing the field well. His deep ball accuracy wasn't anything to write home about. And since they have gotten back to kind of the Steve Sarkisian special, right? Movement, screens, misdirection, suddenly the offense is alive again. How about that? So I think I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to take Texas to cover this spread. I'll take Georgia to win and knock Texas out of playoff contention, give them their third loss on the season. But
I'm not so sure about that, but we can save that conversation for
if there's
day.
any team that gets in at 9-3, it's probably the Texas Longhorns. There's probably too many 10-2s that exist at the end of the season, but Trey's kind of got a point. If there's anybody that's going to get in just based on their brand name, it's going to be the Texas Longhorns at 9-3.
Yeah, I think mathematically it wouldn't eliminate them. This isn't an elimination game in the sense that, we thought Oklahoma and Tennessee was last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever that was, 2 weeks ago. But for all intents and purposes, I kind of think that if Texas can't get a big road win here, now I don't know, maybe if they knock off the number one ranked Texas A&M Aggies when they come calling a town, like that would probably change a lot of hearts and minds. As it stands right now, I don't necessarily see that happening, but rivalry game, anything can happen. We'll see. I do like Texas to keep this close. I think they finally figured out, hey, if we get it to our best athletes, they create magic, right? And Vanderbilt last week was a bad example because they were disinterested in tackling pretty much at any given turn. It was ugly to watch in that first half, and it was clear to see why Texas raced out, I guess 2 weeks ago, to such a big lead. You guys gave the numbers on that. I'm not expecting the missed tackles, but I do feel like Texas kind of raises their intensity a little bit. Sark has had multiple weeks to get ready for this. I don't know. I want a game. I want to believe that this is closer than a full touchdown spread. So I'll take the Longhorns to cover on the road. Those are our big three. Let us know where you're picking on each of those games. Gentlemen, let's move into the rest of the slate. We can kind of jump around here. Actually, I guess first we should probably get to our slept on game of the week, right? And this one truly is, I think, a slept on game. I almost went right past it in our notes. My bad. Cincinnati versus Arizona. It's at the 11 a.m. kick on FS1. A little bit of a sleepy game, perhaps. The Bearcats are 6.5-point favorites over the Wildcats. Now, Trey, I want to kick this to you first because I think most people will look at this spread and go, I lean the home team here. Cincinnati's the better team. We've seen them more. We'll go with what we know. You're on the Wildcats to cover that spread.
Yeah, I am. I think it's a sleepy 11 a.m. spot. Nippert has been a tough place to play for a lot of teams this year. Just ask Iowa State how easy it was to go in. And I think that was an 11 a.m. kick too. It was an afternoon if it wasn't, but I like this Arizona team. They've got a lot of fun pieces on this team. Noah Fafita is still playing quarterback for them. Our listeners, shout out to you guys because we kind of scoffed at you a little bit when y'all put them 7th in the conference in preseason. We were like, what are you guys seeing that we are not? And you look at you guys. They're already bowl eligible with a few games to play and have some opportunities to play spoiler here down the stretch. But I'm of the opinion that I think the most slept on part of Arizona's team is their defense. Their pass defense, guys, is elite nationally. It's like top 5 in success rate against the pass. Cincinnati does not rely as heavily on the pass as some other teams. So And Arizona surely can get got on the ground. They've gotten got on the ground several times already this year. But if they can make Cincinnati one-dimensional, right, and really focus on the run in this one, I wasn't really impressed with Cincinnati when I saw them live in Salt Lake City a couple weeks ago. They missed a bunch of tackles. Anytime that Devin Dampier needed 4 yards, he got 5 on the ground, and it wasn't exactly an exotic offensive scheme for Utah. So I tend to think that Arizona is closer to the top half of the Big 12 than the bottom half, and I'm starting to wonder if Cincinnati was kind of feasting on some very flawed teams. Arizona's a flawed team as well. Everybody in the Big 12 has some flaws outside of Texas Tech. But I think Arizona is closer to that top half, and I think they're going to keep it close with Cincinnati. So I'm going to take them to cover the 6.5 point spread.
You taking Arizona here on the road after they needed a last-second touchdown to beat Kansas at home last week is a move.
Kansas is an awful matchup for them. But they still held Kansas to 20 points, right?
They did.
I know that was at home, but that's a run-first offense that they held to 20 points.
Do you see what their offense did, though, against the 12th ranked defense in the Big 12?
Brother. We're talking about their defense.
Yeah, Fafita threw for like $150 against a porous Jayhawk secondary. So I have my concerns.
Devin Dampier wasn't throwing for very many yards before he played Cincinnati either.
That's fair. They also gave up 5 sacks along the offensive line, so we'll see what Cincinnati can do. I am going to underthink express this. Brett Brennan is 2-6 all time against the spread on the road with Arizona. I think Cincinnati's fresh. They're off a bye week. They're angry. That was not a good showing on the road at Utah. And listen, there is something about Nippert Stadium where the Bearcats seem to give the best performance that they can. So I'm going to take, I think, the more complete team here in Cincinnati. They have everything in front of them, right? Arizona's season is not over, considering the fact that they're bowl eligible and, not many people actually consider them a threat to reach Arlington. Although I did put in that preseason article that I wrote, when our subscribers ranked them so high, I said, well, listen, this is the Big 12. Look up in December and see Brett Brennan hosting a Big 12 championship trophy. Wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world we've ever seen. They're probably, they would need all kinds of chaos to even have a shot at that. But Cincinnati still has that hypothetically in front of them. And so I'm going to go with the team that I think is more complete, that's playing for more, and the home team. I'll take the Bearcats.
Yeah, I think it's probably a bounce back for Cincinnati. I'm taking them as well. Minus the 6.5. They embarrassed themselves right before Trey's very eyes, right? We have to go and impress him again, right? This is the mindset, right? Also, Arizona not very good against the run. Running might be the thing too. I don't know if y'all saw, there was a humorous Barstool Cincinnati picture today, first snow of the season. Might be a little bit cold out there, could be a little bit wet. I don't know if it snows very frequently in Arizona, but it doesn't seem like it. So I'm going to go ahead and
there's actually ski resorts in Arizona, not in Tucson, but
I was going to say where Arizona plays. So we'll pause on that. But yeah, I think overall this is probably just to use the ground to open up the air type of situation for them. And I think they'll probably pull away here in the second half.
People have come after me, Garrett, for weather and elevation takes this year quite a bit. So I just wanted to save you from that ire.
No, you have taken it definitely in the comment section over the topography, specifically around Lubbock. It seems like every time we post a tech video, somebody's got to say something about the desert.
Trey is now an expert on everything I-30 West after some of the comments earlier made in our YouTube channel.
I've learned a lot this year. I also know that time zones are a thing. So another thing working against Arizona is this is going to be a body clock game. What I don't know, Arizona people help me out. I can never remember when you're on what time zone because you guys don't change. So I think you're on Pacific time right now. I don't know. Someone can tell me in the comments.
It does go back and forth, and it's one of the weirdest things. That was one of those weird things when we were driving to San Diego where it happened with the time switch, and so it switched like 4 times as we went through Arizona.
Yeah, it's weird, but it's at least a 1 hour. I don't even know what time zone Cincinnati is in, but it's a body clock game.
It's Ohio. It's Eastern time, right?
Sure. I don't know.
I think Ohio's in the Eastern time zone. I don't know. Right in Cincinnati, Arizona, and subscribe to the YouTube channel while you're here. Might as well, right? We're doing a bang up job this last month. A lot of views, a lot of comments, a lot of new subscribers. Welcome to all the new Jimmies and Joes. Guys, let's go back to the ACC as we whip around here, cover the major conferences, the best storylines of your college football Saturday. Trey, this one actually starts on Friday night. Louisville hosting Clemson. The Cards are 3.5-point favorites. They're off of that just gut punch of a loss to Cal at home last week. But they are the top-ranked 2-loss team in the ACC. So they need help to get to Charlotte, but they are ahead of a team like Miami, who they obviously beat on a Friday night themselves. They've harnessed some of that weeknight magic. Can they do it again against the Clemson Tigers?
I'm going to tentatively take Louisville here, but Clemson looked a lot better against Florida State, and who hasn't looked better against Florida State this year, to be honest? But Wake Forest does not look better against Florida State, or Alabama. But Clemson's looked a lot better. I'm really nervous about this if I'm Louisville, and I'm most nervous because I just don't know what that mental state is like, right? Losing another overtime game at home when everything was in front of you. People were picking you to go to the playoff. I just don't know if that's going to be too deflating. They're going to let Cal beat them twice, but I'm going to stick with my Cards. I think that they're going to find a way here to cover the spread and pull it out.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. The one thing that I'll say about this is anytime we see say the words ACC and Friday night, we should get like an air siren to just go off in the background, because this is one of those where anything can happen. It can get really weird. So I'm almost tempted to pick Clemson just because of that, but I think they'll figure it out.
Certainly, I think made us sit up straight seeing Louisville lose as an 18.5-point favorite as of kick. Checks notes. Our team is currently an 18.5-point favorite at home against the South Carolina Gamecocks. We'll talk about that in a minute. The other thing on Louisville is they need Duke to beat Virginia this week. That would be a massive help in their miraculous climb back towards ACC title game, playing for an ACC title, which, speaking of, Duke is a 6.5-point favorite over Virginia, who just, it kind of felt like had the bubble burst last week when they lost to Wake, didn't it? I mean, it just feels like, okay, now we can stop pretending like Virginia's a really good team. We saw the flaws. Chandler Morris doesn't even get to play in the second half. He's been banged up all year long. I wonder if the Who's have run out of gas a little bit.
Yeah, I love Duke here. I absolutely love hammering Duke here, especially if they don't have Chandler Morris. I've been kind of leading the train of Virginia's been more lucky than good this year, and sometimes it's great to be more lucky than good. But I do think we saw that last week, and especially if they're without their quarterback, I think Duke is going to roll here.
And especially because if Duke wins, it keeps that 9-4 Duke ACC champion scenario alive. And I think we all have to acknowledge that, there's got to be some chaos here at the end of the season. And so we almost have to protect Duke just because that's what's going to happen.
The other game of note in the ACC, Miami's 14.5-point favorites hosting NC State. Miami won last week, and Ruben Bain got his first sack. He's got 3 sacks on the year. He got his first sack in nearly 2 months against Syracuse. For all
that can't be right. I was told he was a Heisman contender after week 2.
We were told a lot of things, and listen, the start, that Notre Dame game, it looked like he was going to be the best pass rusher in America. He hadn't done anything. Miami hadn't done anything really in the last month and a half of note, other than lose games they probably shouldn't have. They're playing an NC State team that is just Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? Like, you don't know what you're going to get from this Wolfpack team. NC State is scoring 32.4 points per game, but Miami is only allowing 15 points a game. The Wolfpack also rely on explosive plays, but then they're literally 135th in pass defense. So I don't know. I mean, it kind of feels like pick either side of this game at your own peril. I tend to think if you can't speed Carson Beck up and force him into some bad decisions through the air, you're probably not going to win outright. But are any of y'all brave enough to take the Pack plus the points here?
I'll take them to be tied at halftime, because Miami is just not playing the first half very well the last couple of weeks. I feel like every time I turn the TV on and I'm checking some of those halftime scores, I'm like, wait, Miami's tied with Stanford? Yeah. And then they just end up winning the game by 30. So I'd take them to, cover 2 points at the half, but I wouldn't pick them to cover 14.5 in the game. I still think Miami has another loss in there somewhere, just not this week.
Yeah, this is the last home game for Miami this year before they go to Virginia Tech and to Pitt to close the season. So two really weird road games back to back to close it out. Yeah, I'm with you, Garrett. If there's a first half line on this, I think I would bet an NC State, but I think Miami pulls away late.
Let's talk SEC now, shall we? Let's start with our team. A team that I made the case for them to be number one in the country on the live show Saturday night. That went over really well with a good portion of college football fan base. It maybe did not, ruffled some feathers with folks down south in Austin. But guys, I want to know, will Texas A&M be 11-0 heading to Austin at the end of the season? They've got Samford next week, who just fired their coach. They're 1-9, so I don't think that Jimbo's revenge is going to come up and bite the Aggies next week. They're 18.5-point favorites against the South Carolina Gamecocks, who objectively have played one of the hardest schedules in America. Mike Elko was talking about that in his press conference today. At the conclusion of Saturday, South Carolina will have played 5 straight games inside the top 12 at the time of playing. So it's been just a gauntlet for South Carolina. They've obviously not done well. It's the 3-6 team. The offense has been brutal. They just fired Mike Shula last week, I want to say. Lenore Sellers hasn't looked at all like the Heisman contender that he was kind of billed as this year. But, guys, the last time that we saw him playing our beloved maroon and white, he was breaking something like 20 tackles. So are we concerned about South Carolina?
There's an interesting, we said this about the Missouri game last week, right? Like A&M's bugaboo is they give up big plays on the ground, but the good news is they don't usually, that can only burn you so many times, right? If you give up a 45-yard touchdown run, okay, and you go 3 and out the next drive, it's like, okay, like you can kind of almost reconcile with that. So I think this A&M defense is up to the task this year. There's just not a lot of help for Lenore Sellers. Last year he had more help. It was on the road at night in a very tough place to play. A&M could certainly beat themselves if they're overlooking this one and looking ahead to Samford, or more honestly, Texas. But yeah, I think they'll be focused. I think focus has not been a problem for Texas A&M this year. And yes, South Carolina has had their schedule, but can anybody tell me their favorite SEC win for South Carolina other than the Kentucky one? You can't.
Is that their only win?
Exist. That is their only win.
I was
in
going to say.
So, yeah, I think A&M rolls here.
They're 120th in scoring this season are the Gamecocks, 83rd in rush defense as well. That seems like a bad formula playing the Aggies.
Yeah, it's not great. I would probably pick A&M with a big number here. There's plenty of, bulletin board material about Lenora Sellers thinking things about Kyle Field. There's plenty of stuff to say about it. Has South Carolina ever won in College Station? I don't know if they've ever won a football game at Kyle Field anyways. I know that they've gotten them a couple times actually in South Carolina, but definitely not in Kyle Field. Yeah, I think it'll be a big day. I honestly don't think that the starters will finish the game. I think that they'll probably pull the starters at some point because we're thinking about health and longevity, and we're not really like stat padding over here. If you're Texas A&M, it's not really the situation. Mike Elko kind of put that to rest anyways. So I think it could be get your reps, get up by 20, and then just kind of sit from there. I don't think South Carolina is a very good football team. I think they're pretty defeated at this point. I don't think that the culture in the locker room is probably very good at this point. And then you got to go on the road to a team that's going to be excited to be back home for the first time in over a month. Yeah, I don't see it, man. I think it's big for the big day for the Aggies.
Ole Miss, 15.5-point favorites against Florida. This kind of feels like the last hurdle for them to clear before they obviously play the Egg Bowl against Mississippi State. Are we concerned about Ole Miss stubbing their toe against the Gators?
No, if I had to pick them to lose one of the games, it would be in Starkville. I think that game's on Black Friday, so yeah. I think they roll here. A little concerned about Ole Miss against that Florida run game. If that Florida run game builds momentum, they can kind of put some fear into you, but I think Ole Miss will handle business here.
Yeah, Ole Miss is pretty great. Florida's butt. They've been terrible since they fired Billy Napier. They're just butt. I don't know what to say other than that. They're just a bad team. They got smoked by Kentucky. They're going to get smoked by Ole Miss.
I'll be more interested to see if it's DJ Lagway playing this whole game. Honestly.
I was about to say, maybe more intrigue about who who trots out at quarterback. I'm sure Lagway will get the start, but he looked bad last week against Kentucky. Obviously got
Yeah, which
benched.
quarterback is going to get spanked by Ole Miss in this one? That's kind of the question we're asking, I think.
Missouri is only a 7.5-point favorite against Mississippi State. I think that's something certainly to keep an eye on. Zollers was terrible, not ready for the moment against Texas A&M last week. Mississippi State hadn't exactly put the fear of God into. They took Texas and Tennessee to overtime, but I don't know that you were ever just sweating bullets against that Mississippi State defense. The offense at times has been really plucky. I think their defense has had some good drives for sure. They've had some moments, but it's like every time they needed to stop, they've broken. I wonder if that finally breaks against Missouri, just because quite honestly, I don't trust what they've got on offense, but that'll be kind of interesting side game maybe to have on your TV as well. Let's move to the Big Ten, shall we? And we talked about USC off the top with the playoff seedings. They're one of the teams I would certainly consider for an at-large team, or at least I'm watching to consider them for an at-large bid. They're 7-2. They've still got a real shot at the Big Ten championship as well. Like if just all chaos broke loose, they're hanging around. They're 5-1 in conference. 6.5-point favorites against Iowa, and then as we mentioned, at Oregon versus UCLA. Kind of two-part question here. Do you trust USC minus the number at home against Iowa? And do you trust Lincoln Riley and the team to focus on the task at hand?
I trust them against Iowa. I really do. I think that they have too many athletes for Iowa. I think it might end up being similar to that Northwestern game last Friday, where Northwestern is in it for the first half. And if they make a play, if they don't fumble it into the end zone, right, then who knows what happens in the second half if they're going into halftime with a lead instead of trailing. But yeah, I think USC just has too many athletes, and Iowa won't get the benefit of the weather kind of slopping things up against like they did against Oregon. So give me the Trojans to roll.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd phrase it like, do I trust them? But I would say that I think that they'll get it done. Like, I do think that USC probably beats Iowa. Now, I wouldn't pick them to do what Oregon did and go on the road and beat Iowa, but I can pick them at home. Now, at Oregon is a different story, and I think that'll be a much more interesting game for next week. But yeah, I don't necessarily say that I trust USC here as much as I just don't think that Iowa has what it takes to get it done when they travel across the country.
Yeah, Kiffin, I keep calling him Kiffin. Riley will have the ranked road mountain to climb again next week at Oregon. That'll be an interesting game for sure. The rest of the Big Ten, Minnesota's at Oregon. Oregon big time favorites on a Friday night. Michigan is at Northwestern. They're playing that game in Wrigley, which is just the most bizarre fit, getting that football field inside the friendly confines. And then Ohio
in the Ivy.
And Ohio State and Indiana, both massive favorites at home. Is there a storyline that you're kind of intrigued by here?
I'm interested in Northwestern. This is, we've kind of just been penciling in Michigan to be 9-2 going into that Ohio State game. At least I have for my money. But Northwestern's played a lot of teams really tough. They're still fighting for bowl eligibility. Like I said just a second ago, they were right there with USC for the first half before it kind of got away from them late. So I don't know if Michigan comes out a little sloppy, if they're not able to challenge Northwestern in multiple ways like they've shown it sometimes this year, could get a little hairy for Michigan in the friendly confines.
Yeah, I'm watching Oregon in this one, coming off of a real physical, real draining game against Iowa, coming back to play Minnesota, who's not as good as Iowa. They're not as good as you are, but a team that can jump up and play physical and can maybe give you some problems if you aren't careful. Really want to watch them kind of put their foot down and do what we had talked about last week, Mitch, was just kind of put your foot on a team and really finish them off, right? Get that killer instinct back. I want to see if they can do that. That'll tell me a lot, I think, about Oregon coming down the stretch in this season.
Sure. No doubt about that. Big 12 headlines. It's kind of a sleepy week in the Big 12. Texas Tech's a massive favorite against UCF. Utah's on the road at Baylor, getting a smaller number than I honestly would have anticipated. 7.5 on the road. We can talk about that in a second. TCU at BYU, who again, the Cougars getting a little bit of a smaller number against a TCU team that did not look good against Iowa State last week. Two kind of lines there with the Utah teams that maybe don't smell right. Is there a leaning that y'all have in either of those games?
Man, I think those lines tell me that it might not be a sleepy week in the Big 12. When you talk about the game in Cincinnati, you talk about both of these teams from the Beehive State, not necessarily blowing it away in the line there. So TCU at BYU, that line at 5.5 is fascinating to me because I think TCU can definitely bow up on the ground more than getting got through the air, and that kind of matches up a little bit better with BYU. Maybe that's a little bit of the nation reacting to BYU getting stomped against Texas Tech and being a little gun shy to put a lot of faith in them. But I think BYU can handle TCU. TCU, I've let one slip away against Iowa State last week, or else they'd be 7-2 going into this game. So they've certainly stacked up some wins and have a lot of talent on that roster. And if they can score quickly to start the game, right, and make BYU play from behind, it could get really, really difficult for the Cougars in a hurry. But I think playing this one in Provo is the difference, and BYU is going to win. I also think Utah probably rolls Baylor on the road. I don't know. That line is really scary to me because I do not know why it's that low. Short of Baylor just having a everything comes together performance. It is a whiteout I almost said Floyd Casey at McLean Stadium. That was a deep pull from the recesses of my mind. But
it's going to be you in the memories wearing white at Floyd Casey if that's the case.
I don't even know what Floyd Casey is now. It's like a parking lot, maybe. It's gone.
I don't. Yeah,
that's too bad too. I think I'd pick both the Utah teams to cover their lines and win pretty big here. I don't really like Baylor or TCU this season a lot. I don't think they're very good. So yeah, I think Trey, you kind of hit on the head there. Just kind of built-in reaction to what BYU did against Texas Tech. I don't think that that's real. I think that they'll bounce back and look pretty good. And yeah, I think Utah's way better than Baylor.
And then finally, guys, let's wrap up with some G5 lines. You've got USF 10.5-point favorites against Navy. I am also fascinated by that. It feels like after Navy got stomped by Notre Dame last week, USF hasn't really offered mercy to anybody offensively either. I would kind of lean towards the Bulls in that one, but that line tells me maybe I should be aware of something. Memphis is at East Carolina, who's got one of the best defenses in all the G5. Pirates are favored by 2.5. Tell you what, no quarter is going to be offered with Memphis. We'll see if Brendan Lewis is healthy. He's been hobbled in multiple weeks now. I think Arrington Maiden had to finish the game last weekend. And then Tulane and UNT are obviously UNT is a favorite right now at the top of the conference. Tulane's still alive. They need to take care of business this week. And then you've got Boise at San Diego State, who, boy, that game lost a lot of its luster. We're still talking about Mountain West championship favorites there, but as far as the playoff, both of those teams are now pretty much eliminated. So out of those storylines, I guess, Trey, kick it to you first. What catches your eye there?
East Carolina is quietly hanging around that American race, man. And I don't know what would happen if they create a 4-way tie scenario. And it's putting the cart way before the horse because chaos, we talk about chaos in the Big 12 and ACC. The American loves to throw us some chaos as well. But if ECU can get past this hurdle, they have a good chance of finishing the year with one conference loss. And USF is the same way. If they can get past Navy, I think they can finish with one loss as well in conference play. So it's shaping up to be an interesting finish. And those 4 teams, USF, ECU, Tulane, and UNT, could all be tied with one conference loss at the end. But North Texas is at UAB this week. Obviously, UAB's already knocked off Memphis, so not a cupcake. Tulane, I think, is Temple this week, if I'm remembering that correctly. I should have written it down on the doc.
Florida Atlantic,
not even close, not even remotely close. No, I was close. They're both Owls. That's
there you go.
Yeah, justifying an awful mistake. But
they're playing right.
Both of those teams just need to take care of business this week, but easier said than done. Crazier things have happened in the American.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be watching USF at Navy, mostly because I'm kind of afraid that if I don't keep my eye on it, it's going to disappear before I have a chance to really watch it. Both teams run the ball so much, this game might be an hour and a half long. Like it's going to be a real quick one, I think, with both teams going up. The 10.5 is interesting because, again, like there may not be enough time in this game for enough possessions to cover that spread. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one kind of finishes up.
Yeah, and USF's defense has been leaky for sure. North Texas was able to move the ball quite frequently against them, although they're coming off a statement performance against UTSA, which talk about Jekyll and Hyde. That team is just bipolar versus the road versus when they're in the Alamo Dome. So take from that what you will. I'm also curious. I've been struggling with my best bet series that we've got going over on Twitter. A couple of 1 and 2 weeks that I've logged in a row. So I'm trying to get off the schneid, but boy, there are some massive lines this week that I'm just really scared to touch. And some of those results like BYU over TCU that I would normally say, yeah, BYU is winning this. The line is telling me to stay away. So searching for some hope and optimism in the dark, I think, over for those best bets. But guys, that will do it for our Week 12 preview. Again, thank you to the Jimmys and Joes for hanging out with us. Write in, let us know where you're going on most of these lines. We'd love to know who your playoff picks are as of right now as well. For Trey Reeves, Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Until Saturday night. So long, everybody.